First time you remember being intimate with Ms. Jones was after church.
Yes.
Okay, so that is a recipe for
Making a baby, yes.
making a baby.
Numerous of times. I mean, it's so many times I can't even count.
You are here today in court to finally prove to the defendant that you are not her daughter's biological father. Certain that the plaintiff fathered your daughter and claim his only motive is to get out of paying the child support he owes.
Ms. Jones and I were never in a committed relationship, and we never really had any type of relationship.
But you had sex.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you using protection at the time?
No.
Get up and go be with him.
And
I was more set to act with him than anybody. I mean.
Wow. At the time Britney was conceived, I don't recall us being sexually active. Seriously, and that was the first time I can remember being intimate with Ms. Jones.
You don't remember none of them nights after the club? Picking me up.
Any of those encounters
Really,
that you talk about me asking you to get out of bed to come be with me, I do not recall those days.
But you do admit to having a sexual relationship, and you did not use
we
protection.
were sexually active.
Okay.
This court proceeding unfolds under the authority of Judge Lauren Lake, where multiple deeply connected paternity disputes are brought before the bench, each one revealing how fragile trust becomes when relationships, responsibility, and the law collide. From the opening moments, the courtroom is not just a place for legal arguments, but a space where personal histories, long-held assumptions, and emotional wounds are laid out as evidence. In the first matter, the court hears from a man who has spent years legally labeled as a father without certainty that the child is biologically his. He explains how his name was placed on a birth certificate by default after missed court appearances, triggering long-term child support obligations. This introduces the relationship between law and justice, highlighting how legal status can exist independently from biological truth. Judge Lauren Lake carefully explains how paternity laws operate, emphasizing the concept of justice in jurisprudence, and why failing to act within legal timelines can permanently alter a person's future. As testimony unfolds, the mother insists she always believed the man was the biological father, while the daughter reveals she grew up believing another man filled that role. This clash of narratives brings the adverse inference in evidence act into focus, as the court weighs credibility, absence, and past behavior. The emotional weight increases when a previous DNA test conducted outside the court is introduced, forcing the courtroom to confront how unofficial proof can still change everything. These are the kinds of moments people later describe on platforms like the Truth Changes Everything podcast, where individuals admit they regret taking the test but needed closure. The court then shifts to a second case, centered on a complicated love triangle that has grown into a legal maze. A mother admits to overlapping relationships, revealing how deception led to confusion over her child's paternity. The alleged father speaks openly about bonding with the child from birth, attending appointments, and believing fully in his role. His testimony reflects the emotional reality behind many DNA test cheating stories, where commitment exists even as doubt grows. Judge Lauren Lake challenges both parties, emphasizing accountability and the painful cost of dishonesty. Here, the evidence stage in divorce case, style analysis becomes central. Although the parents are not married, the court treats the situation with similar gravity, recognizing how parental responsibility mirrors issues often discussed in forums like the Divorce Course podcast. When the DNA results are finally revealed, they confirm the man is not the biological father, a moment that silences the courtroom. Judge Lake reminds everyone that science delivers facts, not comfort, reinforcing why many people later say they regret taking the test, but could not continue living with uncertainty. The proceedings do not end there. Because the mother is pregnant again, the court orders an immediate prenatal test, underscoring how the legal system intervenes to stop cycles of confusion before they repeat. This decisive action mirrors discussions often featured on the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal clarity is presented as a form of protection rather than punishment. Judge Lauren Lake frames the ruling as an opportunity for transformation, referencing ideas similar to Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where accountability is the first step toward breaking destructive patterns. A third case further deepens the courtroom narrative. A pregnant woman accuses the alleged father of cheating and abandoning her, while he claims she was unfaithful throughout their relationship. Financial disputes are added to the paternity issue, including unpaid loans and travel expenses, expanding the scope beyond biology into legal responsibility. Judge Lake dissects each claim, demonstrating how courts separate emotional claims from provable facts. This segment highlights how Supreme Court child support principles trickle down into everyday courtrooms, shaping decisions that affect ordinary families. When prenatal DNA results confirm paternity, the courtroom atmosphere shifts again. The alleged father accepts responsibility, offering an apology and committing to support the child. Judge Lauren Lake delivers a pointed lesson. Having a child cannot force love, but it does create obligation. This moment reinforces why paternity courts often serve as unplanned classrooms for legal and moral education, where individuals learn how truth, once revealed, permanently alters relationships. Across all cases, the courtroom becomes a living example of how adoption stories' full episodes and paternity disputes share a common thread. Identity, responsibility, and truth are inseparable. Each participant arrives with a personal version of reality, but only evidence and DNA can resolve competing claims. Judge Lauren Lake consistently bridges empathy with law, demonstrating how justice is not about humiliation, but resolution. By the end of these proceedings, every person involved leaves changed. Some gain answers they sought for years, others confront outcomes they feared. The court does not promise healing, but it delivers clarity. These cases show why DNA testing is both powerful and dangerous, because while it reveals the truth, it also dismantles illusions people may have relied on to survive. This courtroom story stands as a reminder that when law, science, and human emotion intersect, the results are never simple. Under Judge Lauren Lake's guidance, the court exposes how truth reshapes families, finances, and futures, proving once again that in matters of paternity, the truth always arrives, whether people are ready for it or not. As the courtroom proceedings continue under Judge Lauren Lake, the focus shifts deeper into how unresolved relationships and delayed truth create legal consequences that follow people for decades. What becomes clear is that these cases are not isolated incidents, but patterns. Patterns where silence, avoidance, and dishonesty slowly transform into binding legal outcomes. The court is no longer just deciding biology. It is untangling years of emotional damage layered beneath legal responsibility. In one matter, Judge Lauren Lake carefully revisits how a man became legally bound as a father despite persistent doubts. His absence from early hearings resulted in a default judgment, illustrating how the law operates even when a person is not present. This is where the relationship between law and justice becomes most visible. Justice may feel personal, but law is procedural. The court explains that missing hearings does not pause accountability, and once the window to contest paternity closes, the legal designation stands, even if biology later contradicts it. The courtroom hears testimony showing how child support arrears accumulated over years, becoming an overwhelming financial burden. This is not portrayed as punishment, but as a consequence of legal status. Judge Lauren Lake uses this moment to explain why Supreme Court child support principles exist, to protect the child's stability, not to reward or condemn parental behavior. Still, the emotional tension rises as the adult child questions why the man never fought harder once wages were garnished. This confrontation reveals a painful truth often discussed in people regret taking DNA test conversations. Sometimes the real regret is not the test itself, but the years lost before seeking answers. As testimony continues, the court confronts conflicting father figures in a child's life. One man provided emotional presence, care, and consistency, while another carried legal and financial responsibility without belief or connection. This raises a critical legal question. Does fatherhood come from biology, law, or behavior? Judge Lauren Lake does not offer philosophical debate, but allows the evidence to speak, reinforcing the concept of justice in jurisprudence where outcomes are based on proof, not sentiment. The narrative then moves into another emotionally charged case involving a tangled romantic history. A woman admits to overlapping relationships, exposing how deception created uncertainty around her child's paternity. The alleged father speaks about hospital visits, sleepless nights, and bonding moments, emphasizing how emotional investment can exist without biological certainty. These moments mirror stories frequently shared in DNA test cheating stories, where commitment precedes truth and love clashes with science. Judge Lauren Lake addresses the woman directly, highlighting how repeated dishonesty does more than confuse partners. It destabilizes children. This is where the court's role expands beyond adjudication into intervention. The judge references the need to stop cycles of harm, echoing themes found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where acknowledgement of destructive behavior is the first step toward change. The courtroom becomes a space not just for rulings, but for reckoning. When the DNA results are presented, the silence is immediate and heavy. The man who hoped to be the father is ruled out biologically. Judge Lauren Lake delivers a powerful reminder. DNA does not erase emotional bonds, but it defines legal reality. This distinction is critical, especially for those who later share their experiences on platforms like the Truth Changes Everything podcast, where guests often explain how a single result reshaped their identity overnight. Recognizing that another pregnancy is already underway, Judge Lauren Lake orders prenatal testing without delay. This decision reflects a proactive approach often discussed in the Game Changing Attorney podcast, where early legal clarity is framed as prevention rather than punishment. The court refuses to allow uncertainty to repeat itself, underscoring that the child's right to truth outweighs adult discomfort. The next dispute brings financial claims into focus alongside paternity questions. A pregnant woman seeks reimbursement for travel costs and loans, arguing that promises were made and broken. The alleged father counters that the money was never a loan but emotional support misinterpreted as obligation. Judge Lauren Lake methodically separates emotional expectation from legal evidence, demonstrating how courts evaluate intent and documentation during the evidence stage in divorce case, like proceedings. This case further illustrates how romantic instability spills into legal conflict. Accusations of infidelity, online behavior, and manipulation are examined not for moral judgment, but to establish credibility. The court's analysis highlights how adverse inference in Evidence Act principles apply when stories change or facts are selectively remembered. Judge Lauren Lake challenges inconsistencies firmly, reinforcing that truth is not flexible simply because emotions are involved. When prenatal DNA results confirm biological paternity, the courtroom experiences a shift. Accountability replaces denial. The man accepts responsibility, and Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that certainty brings obligation, not entitlement. She delivers a sobering message. A child cannot be used to secure love, but once parenthood is confirmed, responsibility is non-negotiable. This lesson echoes across many adoption stories' full episodes, where identity and duty are often discovered through conflict rather than choice. Across all proceedings, Judge Lauren Lake maintains a consistent theme. The law exists to protect children from adult chaos. Whether through missed court dates, love triangles, or financial disputes, each case demonstrates how quickly personal decisions become legal realities. The courtroom serves as a mirror, reflecting not just outcomes, but the paths that led there. By this stage, the audience understands that these cases are not about winners and losers. They are about consequences. DNA testing, while scientific and neutral, becomes the catalyst that forces truth into spaces long occupied by denial. Many leave the courtroom changed, some relieved, others devastated, but none untouched. As the proceedings move toward resolution, Judge Lauren Lake reinforces that truth, once revealed, cannot be undone. The court may close, but the results follow every individual into their future. In this courtroom, justice is not dramatic, it is final. And once the DNA speaks, every story must realign around it. As the final phase of these courtroom proceedings unfolds before Judge Lauren Lake, the full weight of truth settles over everyone involved. By this point, the court has moved beyond shock and confrontation into consequence and reflection. What remains is not suspense, but reckoning. Each case now stands as a complete narrative showing how choices, avoidance, and dishonesty eventually converge under the authority of law. Judge Lauren Lake revisits the central theme tying every matter together. Truth delayed is still truth, and when it arrives, it carries legal force. In each dispute, the court has demonstrated how DNA testing is not merely a scientific process, but a legal turning point. Many participants admit, directly or indirectly, that they feared the results yet demanded them anyway, an emotional paradox often discussed in forums where people regret taking DNA test stories surface. The regret is not about knowing, but about what knowing costs. In addressing the adult children affected by these disputes, Judge Lake emphasizes that identity confusion is one of the most lasting consequences of unresolved paternity. Growing up with conflicting narratives about one's father creates emotional fractures that the law cannot fully repair. This reality is echoed in countless adoption stories' full episodes, where individuals seek closure not to assign blame, but to understand who they are. The court acknowledges this pain while maintaining its duty to rule on evidence, not emotion. The legal clarity achieved through DNA results reshapes family dynamics instantly. In one case, a man who spent years believing himself to be a father must now redefine his role, knowing the biological truth contradicts his emotional investment. Judge Lauren Lake addresses this with compassion but firmness, reinforcing that the relationship between law and justice requires boundaries. Love may continue, but legal obligations must align with fact. This distinction prevents future disputes and protects children from ongoing uncertainty. Financial responsibility is also finalized at this stage. Child support determinations are clarified, arrears explained, and future obligations outlined. Judge Lake reiterates that Supreme Court child support standards are designed to ensure consistency and fairness nationwide, regardless of personal circumstances. These standards do not evaluate intent or emotion, they enforce responsibility. The court makes it clear that avoiding early legal action often leads to harsher consequences later, a lesson repeated across all cases heard. In reflecting on the love triangles and repeated deception exposed during testimony, Judge Lauren Lake directly confronts patterns of behavior. She frames dishonesty not as a moral failure alone, but as a legal risk that multiplies harm. Her words mirror insights often shared on platforms like Celebrate Recovery Testimonies, where acknowledgement of destructive habits is presented as the first step toward meaningful change. The court's message is clear. Without accountability, cycles repeat and children pay the price. One of the most sobering moments comes when Judge Lake explains why the court intervened proactively in ongoing pregnancies. By ordering prenatal testing, the court prevents future identity disputes before they can take root. This forward-looking approach reflects strategies discussed in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where early legal clarity is framed as a protective measure. The court refuses to allow uncertainty to become inheritance. As the final rulings are issued, the courtroom atmosphere shifts from confrontation to resignation. The parties now understand that the process was never about winning arguments, but about aligning lives with truth. Judge Lauren Lake reminds them that while DNA may close legal questions, healing requires personal responsibility beyond the courtroom. This sentiment resonates with listeners of programs like the Divorce Course podcast, where legal outcomes are often described as beginnings rather than endings. The court also addresses credibility, reminding participants how inconsistencies and omissions influenced rulings. Through careful examination, Judge Lake demonstrates how the adverse inference in Evidence Act applies when parties fail to present full or timely information. Silence, delay, and contradiction all carry legal meaning. This reinforces the idea that truth does not only emerge through tests, but through consistent behavior. By the end of proceedings, each case stands as a complete lesson in the concept of justice in jurisprudence. Justice here is not emotional satisfaction, but resolution grounded in evidence. The court does not erase pain, but it prevents further harm by establishing clear legal boundaries. Judge Lauren Lake's role is not to heal relationships, but to ensure that children are protected by truth rather than trapped in uncertainty. The final moments underscore why paternity courts continue to draw attention. These are not abstract legal debates. They are lived experiences where science, law, and human emotion collide. The outcomes reflect what many later discuss on platforms like the Truth Changes Everything podcast, that knowing the truth may break illusions, but living without it is worse. As court adjourns, the participants leave with answers that will shape their futures. Some walk away with relief, others with grief, but all with certainty. The courtroom doors close, yet the impact of these rulings continues beyond the walls. Responsibilities are now defined, identities clarified, and the law has spoken. In the end, these cases collectively reveal a powerful truth. DNA testing does not create chaos, it reveals it. The chaos already exists in secrets, avoidance, and half-truths. Under Judge Lauren Lake, the court strips away uncertainty and replaces it with clarity, even when that clarity is painful. This is the function of justice, not to comfort but to conclude. Through every testimony, result, and ruling, the court reinforces one final message: truth is inevitable. Whether sought willingly or forced by circumstance, it arrives with authority. And once it does, life must reorganize around it. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, the truth does not whisper. It stands undeniable and changes everything.